Welcome to Gunners at War, a captivating session that immerses you in the world of artillery heroes. Inspired by two compelling books, this journey unfolds with Colonel Mandeep Singh's History of Indian Air Defence Artillery 1940 to 1945. Discover the remarkable growth of India's air defence artillery from its modest origins to over 34 regiments. These unsung heroes served in diverse battlefields, from defending Singapore to triumphantly returning to Burma, showcasing unity and resilience in the face of adversity. Our exploration continues with Honor and Glory, 5 great artillery battles, where cannons emerge as the ultimate game changers, rewriting history in battles. I invite the panelists to come up on the stage now. Colonel Mandeep Singh, retired. Major General AJS Sandhu, PVSM, retired. I also request our moderator, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, PVSM, YSM, SM, ADC, retired, to come up on the stage, please.
Okay, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon and a warm welcome to all of you to this session on Gunners at War. Well, today is an opportunity to pick the minds of, and shall I say, to engage with two gifted soldiers, diligent students of history, and a very rare breed among soldiers, authors, authentic authors who are prolific in their works. First of all, my former boss and a well-known gunner officer, Major General AJS Sandhu, Abdo Sandhu as he's known. He's from the field artillery. I'm making that distinction because today we have both AD and field artillery with their books. The book that we are discussing today is With Honor and Glory, 5 Great Artillery Battles. So that's the book we'll discuss, but General Sandhu is also known for another book, Battleground Chum, an account of one of the most intense battles of the 1971 war. And both these books, I went through the one we are discussing today over the last 2 days. They not only have historical facts, but very deep insights. So it speaks volumes of General Sandhu's authorship. Also joining us is Colonel Mandeep Singh. He's an air defense gunner, equally prolific. He's written a range of books, from the Hong Kong, Singapore Royal Artillery to the anti-aircraft artillery in combat from 1950 to 1972, and AD artillery in combat from 1970 to the present age of surface-to-air missiles. I mean, it was really fascinating to even see, the broad sweep that he has covered. And the book that we'll discuss today of Colonel Mandeep is The History of Air Defense Artillery, 1940-1945. So that's what we will focus on. This session should also remind us that the AD and field artillery were once joined at the hip. When I was commissioned into the artillery in Jhansi, and General Sandhu was my battery commander, later CO, I remember 2 field regiment SP and 151 AD SP. We trained together, we competed with each other, and we were, all one. Before the AD chose to, I think for valid reasons, they chose to leave us for greener pastures because of the change in their operational role and perhaps the necessity of modern war fighting. And today AD has its very distinct independent character and profile. But I was just wondering that today, when we seem to have entered the era of integrated kill chains, when a Hamas and Hezbollah rocket projectile is intercepted by the Tamir missile fired by the Iron Dome, or when you have the HIMARS and the field artillery in Ukraine being targeted by a swarm of drones, when field artillery today is operating in a very intense air defense environment, perhaps it is time to get field artillery and AD artillery together again. I don't know whether, this is the opportune moment. But this is also the prompt for my first question to Colonel Mandeep Singh, which is, could you give us an overview of how the AD environment globally and in the Indian context has evolved over the years. In your book, you talk of the AD artillery making its debut in 1870, if I'm not mistaken, in the Franco-Prussian War, to the present day, a bird-eyes view in macro terms. How has the AD artillery grown?
As you mentioned, the air defense artillery, in fact, came before the ADRT, in fact, came in being before the advent of the aircraft. The first guns were used to shoot down balloons during the Franco-Prussian War. And much later, the aircraft came into being, and that is how it all started. The First World War was the first use of aircraft in a big way. And the British and the German artillery, in fact, were the pioneers in anti-aircraft. But as happens after all wars, the anti-aircraft artillery lost the prominence after that. And suddenly from about 500 units, you were down to about 10 odd. India got the first unit in 1926. There was one solitary battery, you may have found it in the book, that was located in Peshawar. It was supposed to be guarding against the Russian threat in case they ever came through Afghanistan. And because there was no threat in India, the anti-aircraft artillery did not come into being till 1940. Globally, of course, the threat was there of the aircraft. The development took place. Bofors is a very famous gun that everybody knows. At 40 millimeter, you find it all over. And much later, the missiles came into being in 1970s and all. And as you mentioned today, it is, it is much more important than it was earlier. And you're talking about HIMARS, and you're talking of Iron Dome, and you're talking of the Patriots. To me, the prominence will only increase, and it is high time we realize that. And one option that you are talking of, combining field and ADRT, when it is good, because I think we are one of the very few countries which have these two separate arms, AD and field artillery. Even USA does not have it separate. It is part of artillery. And it is high time that we united and...
Just raise your mic, please.
Maybe we went back into just regiment of artillery. Good idea. At least personally,
you think
personally I am for it.
It was a retrograde step and it's time to get together again?
I mean, it's a very, how do I say, politically loaded question.
Operationally, how do you look at it?
The advantages that I thought would accrue from that, I don't think we have got that.
I hope the DG artillery and the DG...
I can only say that.
But on a more serious note, you see in Ukraine, the air defense artillery is one of the reasons why Russian air power has been underwhelming. And when Russian air powers have not been able to get across, the AD artillery is left to target the drones and the missiles. So from aircraft, you're actually moving to drones and missiles, and perhaps we need you to protect field artillery dispositions.
No, if you look at that way, the threat has already changed. The age of the aircraft is now, going down, and it is more of missiles and drones which are coming as the threat. And it is time we realize that and we catered for that. And the targeting has also changed. Now, if you're talking of HIMARS and the other artillery systems, they are going to become the prime targets. So the focus has to shift into that, from looking after the other concentrations and other targets. So maybe the time is there to have a relook.
General Sandhu sir, in your book, With Honor and Glory, 5 Great Artillery Battles, you focused on the battles of Gettysburg, Waimy Bridge, I hope I pronounced it right, Bir Hakeem, Cham and Tololing. Very well chosen battles. Could you give us an overview or an account as to how the artillery in role and outcomes has evolved over these 5 key battles? Why did you choose them? And what are the benchmarks of the evolution of artillery through these great battles?
Okay, when I chose the battles, actually, I was primarily looking for those battles where RT played a dominant role. It always plays a dominant role, but where it affected the outcomes, final outcomes. And these battles cover 137 years, from the first battle to the last battle. So it's over a century, and they were fought on 4 continents. So to that effect, as you go along reading the book, you do get a sense of how RT kept on improving and evolving. Now, in the Battle of Gettysburg, the very first battle, which was fought in Civil War, U.S. Civil War, at that point of time, the RT was still in its infancy. It was a short-range, direct-firing arm, and therefore, in fact, it was referred to as the long arm of the infantry, so to say. But it was given a very preemptive role even then. Surprisingly, I mean, just to quote one or two things, one was that when the Confederate leading division was advancing onto Gettysburg, they didn't have enough cavalry. They didn't have cavalry actually. So what they did was the advance was led by an RT battery, not by the infantry. Fredericksburg battery, 6 guns, and they are the fellows who had the honor of firing the first shots in the battle. And the second is a statement by the Confederate General Sherman, who later became their chief, much later. He made a statement that a battery of field RT is worth 1,000 muskets, and that was then. So, but because of short range, they had to be located in the, let's say, infantry position. They had to be able to see the other side. So that was then. Though they fired a cannonade of, famous cannonade, it's called the Great Cannonade at one point of time, last hurrah of these chaps. The attack failed, but they fired 140 guns for 2 hours to sort of soften the position. So that was the first battle of mine where this was the state. Then comes Vimy Ridge. That was 5 decades later, First World War. And why I chose that battle is by then a lot of things had improved. Heavier guns, longer ranges, better munitions. But, and this will probably interest the audience also, that battle was fought over 4 days and 4 Victoria Crosses. It started on Easter Monday, 9th January of 1917. And it was an attack on a very formidable escarpment held by the Germans, where 2 attacks had failed earlier. But what is of interest about the RT and how much it had developed and how the production has come about, that it started with a barrage of 983 guns firing, the biggest barrage in history. It shattered windows of towns 30 kilometers away, 55 regiments. But by then certain procedures like flash spotting, sound ranging had come up, so that had reached that stage. Then when you come to the battle of, the Second World War, next battle I picked was Second World War, by when it had matured structurally and in every way, though an indirect fire was the order of the day. But I picked a battle which was a direct fire battle, Battle of Bir Hakeem, where 2 Indian Field Regiment, and incidentally we both belong to that regiment, firing on in open sights, direct fire, they knocked out 56 tanks of Rommel's Panzer, that Africa Corps. 56 tanks. That's not a joke. They didn't know, nobody left the guns, nobody fled, and at the end of the day, this regiment, 19 officers prisoners, 19, including Kumaramangalam, who became chief, and Tika Khan, who became Pakistan chief, and 200 men became prisoners. This was state of affairs. This is the price they paid, but they knocked off 56 tanks. Then the next 2 battles I chose were Indian battles, Battle of Cham, you mentioned, and the Battle of Tololing, Tiger Hill, that is Kargil. By that time, of course, a lot of advancements had taken place, and when you read the battles, you get a sense of it. I don't want to cover all that. But the reason I chose Cham was because in 1971, the quantum of artillery used in Cham was more than anywhere else. Pakistan it was the biggest land offensive of the Pakistan army, toughest battle of 71, and for which they amassed 10 regiments plus, which was, by the way, again, maybe revealing to you all, it was more artillery which they deployed here in the Cham sector than they had in the entire Bangladesh to defend themselves. That was the quantum. And so, and when you add that to us, 300 guns firing in a small strip of what's a Chum salient, that was the highest per square kilometer RT deployment in the war. And of course, Tololing and Tiger Hill, part of the Kargil, wider Kargil conflict, that was, that was a gunner's battle all the way, because by the time we had amassed 16 more regiments there, and the whole tide changed, because we were able to support every battalion attack with 120 guns, and with, more importantly, direct fire. Direct fire from guns at gun positions at 10, 11,000 onto features like Tololing and all at 16,000, which is, I don't know how many gunners are here, but it's not easy to fire direct fire in that fashion. But that is what turned the tide, and I think 3 months back, in one of the features which we had captured has been named Gun Hell. To commemorate the role of RT in capture of that feature and actually in the whole of the war. So that's the way these battles were chosen. And
just one quick follow-up, sir. The field artillery spends its entire life in practicing and perfecting long-range indirect fire. But two critical battles you mentioned, Bir Hakeem and Tiger Hill Tololing, is about direct fire.
yes.
So are we practicing the wrong stuff?
Interesting question. I don't think we are practicing the wrong stuff, but we need to focus on this. Because
And on a more serious note, in our courses, YOs and all, our EKIGs used to tell us,
yeah.
कि direct firing आपके ज़्यादा काम आएगी.
And that happened in both these. So you get a flavor of the evolution as you go through each battle. After all, 137 years is a long time.
Colonel Mandeep, some fascinating accounts from your book. I mean, for me, it was news. So this from your book that anti-aircraft battery of the Royal Artillery first gets stationed in India in 1921. But in that same book, you go on to say that the true baptism of anti-aircraft artillery takes place in the Malayan campaign. So could you give us a brief account of the salience of the Malayan campaign? And why do you say that we got baptized in that campaign, or air defense artillery got baptized?
The first battery that was in India was of the Royal Artillery, as I mentioned, at Peshawar. The first Indian regiment got raised in September. It had about 1,200 people. There were 5 batteries. It had an additional battery of light regiment. And it was deployed right from Kota Bharu in the Malayan Peninsula down to Singapore. When I say the baptism was there, because this was the first chance that Indian artillery or Indian air defense artillery had to go into battle. And it was actually a unique experience. If you read the war diary of that, the attacks used to be with the massed attacks by 27, 54, 107 aircraft at one time. And as the previous session you could discuss, it was totally a strange experience for an Indian gunner, 19, 20-year-old boy, looking at aircraft, 50 of them coming all over and dropping bombs. And unfortunately, the battery in Kota Bharu was lost. There were 2 more batteries in the Malayan Peninsula. They were lost. The entire regiment in Singapore was lost. About 200 people got killed. About 300 more got killed in the prisoner of war camp. So the regiment was totally written off. But they did well. They got 1 DSO, 1 military cross, 2 IDSMs, 5 mentioned in dispatches. Overall, it was good experience if you take that way. But it was a sad end to a regiment. And unfortunately, that was never raised. That 1 HA regiment was never raised, and it is never there in AD artillery history. That gap remains. But that was the baptism. Incidentally, for Indians, that was not the first experience. If you go into that book, Indian gunners also joined the Royal Artillery. There was what you mentioned, Hong Kong, Singapore Royal Artillery. And we had the batteries at Singapore, at Hong Kong, at Aden, in Somaliland. So the first experience that Indians had of firing at an enemy aircraft was actually in Aden. An Italian air raid came into there in April of 1941. That was the first time Indians fired. And the Britishers are big doubt whether, Indians will be able to handle the anti-aircraft guns or not. Whether they will be able to handle radars, sound ranging equipment. But they did well. They shot down, I think, about 13 or 14 aircraft. So if you technically look at it, the baptism was not in Malaya, but it was in Eden and in Somaliland for Indian gunners. So that is how we got into it. And later it was in the Burma campaign that we had 2 batteries. And maybe we can talk about it a bit later, because I think that was the finest hour for Indian artillery, ADRT, during the war, that we had that.
I have a question for both of you, and this is, regarding the study of history as a craft. Now, officers like me, the only times we studied military history was Part B, Part D, and Staff College. And Part B too, somebody told me it was, the World War II. So he said, sir, for every question, just draw a line, is taraf kar dena France, UK, is taraf Germany, draw a couple of arrows. On a serious note, our attitude to history has been very cursory, though, history has great lessons for all of us, but it is very cursory and superficial. How did you personally, of your own violation, get your interest in history going? Because the books that you've churned out cannot happen unless those questions are within you. So how does history come to you so naturally and it just doesn't get to us, you and then General Sandhu?
Any question? You want me to? Okay, you mentioned you got commissioned into artillery 82 December. I was commissioned into 28 AD regiment, and incidentally I happened to be posted to Bravo troop of Papa Battery. We had a VRC from that troop, Madlai Muthu, in 65. He was one of the 4 VRCs. And as you know, the regiment puts up that name and the photograph very prominently, and we were proud that we are from that troop which, got a VRC. Incidentally, I read a book of 65 war, and there was no mention of him. It was of the air war by Jagan and Chopra. So I started getting into more details, why that name is missing, because it felt bad for me, my regimental hero is not there. Then I found out that none of the accounts of ADRT were there in the books. And with due respect to you, sir, and the other gunner historians, ADRT somehow was missing in almost all books.
But you made up for all that in your...
No, I hope so. And I read your book, sir, The Battle of Chamb. You mentioned a battery commander of ours, and he did a good job. And that was one of the very few acknowledgements that, ADRT was there in the battle. And surprisingly, I found even in the Orbat, the AD troops and batteries were missing. So that started, bugging me. And I first wrote a book about the 65 war to correct that anomaly, then of the 71, then these 2 books that you mentioned. Then I got the Second World War. There are a whole lot of others. But my main aim was that, we were there. And incidentally, I don't know, not many people know. And Second World War, in one time, 1943, there were more AD regiments than field regiments in the Indian Army. There were about 40 regiments of ADRT. And if you look at the account of ADRT, the artillery in the battles, somehow they are all missing. So that is how it all started.
So it was your reaction to, what shall I say, profound ill treatment at the hand of...
No, not ill treatment. It happens. I was just thinking,
I'm joking.
Everybody contributes.
Yeah, I know.
But not everybody gets a chance to write about it and record it. I thought I should use that.
Yes, sir.
And write something about it.
My compliments to you.
Thank you.
General Sandhu, sir, you have studied these 5 great artillery battles in such outstanding detail. So I want to ask you regarding Ukraine. Many informed commentators describe it as an artillery battle. Antony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, I've heard President Biden calling it an artillery battle. And it is the mighty Americans, look how they are running out of ammunition. I'm told the Ukrainians, they fire 100,000 rounds a week. And the mighty American military industrial complex can only churn out 110,000 rounds in a month. President Biden is personally going around looking for ammunition from Korea and other allies. I'm told there is one study which says that the Americans don't have 7 days of missiles and munitions in a Taiwan contingency. So therefore it does seem to me that it is not a cliche. Ukraine is really an artillery battle. Would you agree, or do you think artillery gets more prominent in attrition battles like Ukraine and not so much in mechanized battles like Cham or, say, the pains of World War II?
I think, firstly, short answer to your question, is it an arty battle? I think the answer is yes. And the reason is not far to seek. Because traditionally, Russia and its erstwhile Soviet Union have always relied upon artillery as the primary component of force application.
God of war.
God of war. Stalin called it the God of war. So starting from Second World War, Russians used artillery en masse to pulverize the position so that by the time the infantry and the tanks went in, the task was facilitated. Now that has continued. And in fact, somebody has, I was reading the other day, it is in the Rusi journal, that a chap has written, an officer has written there, that about the Russian army. He says the Russian army is an artillery army with a lot of tanks. And here's my coursemate, he just walked in, he's a tank man. So this is, they are alluding to the fact that RT, and that includes rockets, not just guns, is a huge component of their ground forces. Very huge one. And that has come into place, manifest in this present conflict. And why it also becomes an RT battle in another dimension is because who are they fighting? Ukraine. Ukraine was part of Soviet Union. So they are employing the same degree of, or same doctrines and same kind of procedures as the Russians. They also lay stress on the preponderance of RT. So with both sides, putting in so much of RT, it is in many ways an RT battle. And as far as ammunition is concerned, Ukraine, you rightly said, you gave absolutely spot-on figures about ammunition consumption. Because of such a use of RT, the ammunition will obviously keep will keep finishing, and you need to replenish. Now, Ukraine is being helped by the collective West to replenish their losses of ammunition or expenditure of ammunition. But what has come as a revelation is the Russian capacity. They are not being aided by anybody except North Korea. Iran. North Korea is aiding them, and they sent 1,000 wagons of all kind of supplies recently, which included ammunition. But other than that, there's nobody helping them. But they have ramped up their capacities, and they are managing to some extent, hold on with their ammunition and replenish the forward unit. So, and I think it will carry on like that for some time.
Colonel Mandeep, one particular paragraph in your book caught my eye, and that's, is a reference to April 1942 in the World War II, when you talk of the Japanese air raid over Ceylon, Sri Lanka. And you say that Winston Churchill described the event as the most dangerous moment of the Second World War and the one that caused him the most alarm. So not Dunkirk, not Operation Sea Lord, air raid over Ceylon. I mean, is that an accurate description? It must be. I was wondering why was it so significant?
That quote is correct. But if I may say, you have to take all these statements with a pinch of salt. All these, that this is the most dangerous thing, this is the most important thing. Obviously it was dangerous because that was the first time the Japanese had reached the South Asian subcontinent. And if they could strike here, the supplies from here, the reinforcements coming from here, if they could threaten that, obviously the war effort in the Western Front could be affected. So I think it was in that context he said that in case Japanese can come here and strike to this point, I mean, they were all relying on India for, the wheat they sent, the munitions that went, the manpower that went. And the Japanese Navy had come up to Ceylon, and there was a plan of theirs even to go towards Maldives and the Diego Garcia side. There was a base there also. Indian artillery even went to defend that, ADRT. So in that context, it was dangerous, but as I said, like when he talks of the Battle of Britain, he said about the RAF, that they saved us. When he talks of infantry, he says, they are the things. So all these statements have to be taken in that context. Well, don't read too much into it. My personal view,
All right.
in that way.
So, sir, the latest entrants to the gunner fraternity are the Hamas and the Hezbollah, non-state actors, Iran and its proxies. And they have really, very seriously, this whole gun, missile, drone complex, they have integrated it very cleverly and to great effect. And little to wonder then that Iran is a country under sanctions, is aiding Russia in the Ukraine battle. And see, sir, what they've done here. On 7th October, those 5,000 rounds in 25 minutes changed the whole game. It caught Israel napping. So, are we seeing, and these arsenals with these proxies are getting sophisticated, range. Hamas claims Hezbollah claims 150 kilometers. And if they open up in this escalation, they'll hit Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. The saturation strikes, precision. So, are we seeing that firepower is getting democratized? How is it changing? Is there a historical basis to this, General Sandhu?
This has been a revelation. 5,000 rockets being fired in a matter of hours on 7th October. But, and you use a very interesting phrase, democratization of firepower. Now, historical basis, there is to it, to my mind, because immediately two examples come to the fore. One is the Malayan insurgency of 1948, where the MNLA, the Malayan National Liberation Army, they were very well armed and very well structured, and they had firepower, of course not rockets, they probably didn't exist at that time, but they had firepower in terms of mortars. And they were up against the British in Malaya. But I would say a more important thing which is of significance to us in our history, our own history, goes back to 1966, when the Mesos on 28th February 1966, I've just written a chapter somewhere else, so I know the date. 28th February 1966, they started an open insurrection, which started the Meso insurgency, which was the bloodiest insurgency in the history of our insurgencies. These people had clandestinely, over the past, under our nose, just exactly what Hamas has gone and done, under the nose of Israelis. They had formed an army, much like ours, with companies, battalions and brigades, up to brigade. And they had also armed themselves with mortars at that time. Now, how do they get them? Because they had benefactors like China, and they used to go through Burma and reach them, and they had next door East Pakistan. So, who were giving them finances, they were giving them training, and they were giving them weaponry. Now, in the instant case also, you will find that Hamas and Hezbollah, both, they also need, any non-state actor would need help of the kind that I just mentioned in all these 3-4 things from a state benefactor. And in this case, you rightly said, Iran has been providing them training, arms, finances, everything, and technology to produce indigenously. And Qatar, incidentally, has also given a lot of money. They have not given weaponry or technology, but they have given a lot of money. So, and incidentally, Hamas is a very peculiar non-state actor, because it is a non-state actor which is ruling a state. It is in governance in the Gaza Strip since 2007. It's the ruling governing authority there, and yet it's a non-state actor because it has been branded as a terrorist organization, which it is. Now, both of them, like you said, have a vast array of rockets. Their arsenal has thousands. I'm sure these fellows who have just expended 5,000, they must be having God knows 5,000 more in the tunnels down below. And you know, one slightly separate point I'll make here. In 20 years ago, I think it was 2003, I had gone with General Wij on an official, he led an official delegation to Israel, and we spent one week there. We were made to overfly Gaza many times in choppers to see that strip. It's just 41 kilometers by 20. It's that small. And we were taken to the Lebanese border, which side there's the Hezbollah. And we were shown the fence, the so-called fence, and the surveillance center, where they were manned entirely by women, girls out of college, small segments in their screen, and their job was to keep the whole fence under surveillance. Anybody behind also could be seen. And next to them was a command and control center, operational center, which if anything happened, they passed on the information there, and behind them was the retaliation units. It was that good. We were so impressed that when we came back, General Wij ordered a study as to where we can implement the fencing, and first fence came up in somewhere in 25 Dev, and that has been breached now with impunity. So in fact, I think there are lessons for India about how efficient the fence is, and if these guys can get hold of all these rockets and so on, we need to be careful, because tomorrow the terrorists who are coming in with light arms and all that, and J&K, they may come with something heavier, and then we'll be in a problem if we don't see it. So I think your thing is right, but if you have finances and you have the backing, you can do it. They did it in front of them, in front of their nose, literally.
One question apiece to both of you. This is regarding the Battle of Cham. General Sandhu, sir, you recount an incident where in that battle the maximum range gets exceeded. Now that is pretty interesting. So ingenuities to exceed maximum range. Similarly, Colonel Mandeep, you in your battles of 65 and 71 recount how 27 AD and I forget the other regiment, you name the gunners, Perumal and Shripati Singh, who take down a starfighter and the Sabre jet. Could you just tell us briefly about both the two incidents?
Okay. About how the guns fired when maximum range was exceeded. This was by 39 Medium Regiment, and they were equipped with old vintage 5.5-inch medium guns. Now, they didn't have these cartridges which we have, brass cartridges. They had bags, charge bags, which they put in the chamber. So, the OP officer, Captain R.I. Singh, who later became a colonel, he saw huge enemy build-up, so he passed his own location, obviously, but he also passed the target data of that to the GPO, who was a second lieutenant, young second lieutenant, Dasmana, who became a brigadier. Now, so the whole thing was plotted, and it was in maximum range, but within range, maximum, so they fired charge super. Charge super was the final charge. For those of you who know, I mean, that's the maximum velocity you can get with it, and therefore the maximum range. So they fired that, and it went and landed wherever. So the OP officer, when he saw it, it had landed short of the target. So he gave an add correction. Add 800. Matlab you now add 800 to the maximum, whatever range it was. So when it was plotted at the gun area, onto the guns, the number one of the gun who was ranging, he shouted, elevation expended. Elevation expended means you can't plot that anymore. maximum elevation exceeded. So this fellow didn't know what to do. But then he quickly thought, he said, let me try something. So what he did was that he, along with the charge super which was being fired, he took one bag, that is the smallest charge, and he put that also into the gun chamber, thereby exceeding the propulsion capacity to push the cartridge, the shell, and therefore take it further. Now this is a dangerous thing. The barrel can explode. But he did that, and he verbally explained to the number one of the gun that this is what we'll do. So you, after having put all the data, you stand clear. Stand clear means leave the guns. The whole detachment will move away, and they tied a long cord to the firing lanyard, and they operated it, and the thing fired. And it went and landed at the right place, slightly over, so they got a drop correction, and it was back within range. So that's how they managed to engage this target, and it was very successfully engaged. This was basically to answer your question, but if you don't mind, I would like to, similar thing which you asked him in Cham. This is very interesting because it's part of history. This is how things happen. The date was 8th of December. And the corps commander was General Sartaj Singh, who had flown into the Cham sector, and he was going to the front line because at night there were going to be some counterattacks put in by us against the Pakistanis. So the GOC was driving him. GOC driving, corps commander on the left, and Piche sitting the ADC, as normally happens, and they are driving to the front line towards the border where the fighting was going on. And what do they see? Straight from Hollywood movie. What do they see? They see two sabers coming. A pair of sabers, one behind the other. One and slightly echeloned, another one. And the next thing they found, rat, our AD opened up, which was deployed in front. And then the second saber was hit and it came down. It crashed and the pilot died. I put his name in the book. This whole incident figures in my book, Battleground Cham. So the corps commander, he looked at the GOC, he said, well, let's change course. I want to go to the gun position, the AD gun position, and meet the fellow who shot this down. So what does he do? The GOC turned the jeep and they went off to the gun position. And who was there? One young captain, Deepak Kaul, you probably know him well. And he had been my senior cadet captain in NDA. So I knew him too. And I interviewed him, and his whole thing is in the book. He was standing there, and he came and saluted General Sartaj Singh, who was a colonel commandant of the RT. That time AD was part of the RT, Indian RT. And General Sartaj said, who shot this one, the Sheba? He said, sir, no, he said, who's the number one of the gun which shot? He said, sir, Havaldar Uttam Javalge. He said, Veer Chakra, immediately. That man was given a Veer Chakra on the spot. One of the few cases of that war. And he got a Veer Chakra. He became, I think, a Subedar major or something later on. But the best part is that Captain Deepak Kaul was not yet done. And he, later the same evening when he was going back to his other gun position, he found some movement in the bushes. And in the skirmish that followed, he captured the commanding officer of a Pakistan battalion, who was the highest ranking Pakistani prisoner captured in the Western theatre. And he captured him. And he, till today, has that helmet of his, that fellow, that Colonel Sabu was captured, poor fellow, he was wounded. So this is the story of air defense, one incident only.
Colonel Mandeep, I think we'll skip that. Our audience seems to have grown. So we have just 10 minutes remaining. So let's open the house for some questions. So if there are any questions, please. Yeah, General Mandeep.
Actually, I'm a gunner, so I don't think I need a mic.
Gunners here also.
Very fascinating discussion, sir. I was particularly intrigued by this suggestion about the re-merger of AD and field artillery. So I'm going to talk about it.
Personal views.
Maybe another time. But aside from that, that time. There's another one which I can suggest, sir, that is about the Battle of Kearney. It is the largest artillery battle fought in an post 71 undeclared war. It was there sometime in 91-92 in 25 Div. That's when the brigade commander was killed and 2 battalions were written off in an FUP using Mira night sights, which were picked up and brought from Akhnur by a mech battalion that had just got them. They picked up a whole brigade in an FUP in Poonch sector. And of course, Ukraine and Hamas could make your next lineup of 5. That's just a suggestion, sir. But a question to you, sir. If you see now the modern artillery transformation that is happening, particularly in China, they are doing away with foot infantry. They have gone into combined arms brigades. And they are now looking at pulverization and annihilation. Actually, they use the word annihilation of objectives. And therefore, there is in the combined arms brigades, there are only armored and armored infantry or mech infantry battalions. And the infantry is now being carried as close to the objective. And there's an overwhelming use of firepower. Then dismount and just mop up the objective. What, in your view, should we not now shift from neutralization, which was 20%, to destruction, which was 30%, to actually annihilation, which should be about 70 to 80%? Thank you.
I tend to agree with you, actually. Firstly, thanks for suggesting those battles that you said. I will certainly, I already have it in mind to publish a part 2 of that book. But I must tell you right away that, like he said, AD gets short shrift in write-ups. Well, the next to that is RT. We also get short shrift, but slightly better than them. And that is why when I started with 16 battles and 10 and then 12, finally I had to home on to 5 where I could get a lot of material. But I will note these down. You have made valid points and let me see if there is material on them, most certainly. Now, you are right on the way ahead. You have talked about the way ahead. And that time has come now. The time has come that there has to be, the application of firepower has to be such. Firstly, it should be combined. Everybody has a role to play. And to make it easier for the combined arms brigades and formations to go, it means that you must have enough firepower to pulverize the, you use the word annihilate, if we can, nothing like it, but at least pulverize them and degrade them to such an extent that it becomes much easier for the combined arms brigade to fulfill its task. I think the time has come, but for that, there is one big factor, and that is that you need capability development. You have to have that many, guns, rockets, missiles. You need that much of firepower. And unless we start, building up artillery and missile forces, tactical missile forces, we won't be able to achieve that. Because today, you are well aware that our RT capability has not reached that level. 200 and some plus units is not enough for that. But I think that is the way ahead, and I think General has retired very recently, so he knows more than me.
I'm the moderator
So,
for today.
over to you.
Right, any more questions? Yeah, please.
Sir, how differently would the battle...
Just give your name, please.
My name is Satyajit Lal, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, how differently, in your opinion, would the Battle of Chamb have progressed had Captain Arvind Nautiyal not shot down General Iftikhar Khan Jhanjua?
Can you put on the mic? I couldn't get your whole question. How different would have?
The Battle of Chamb progressed had Captain Arvind Nautiyal not shot down General Iftikhar Khan Jhanjua.
Satyajit, I am sorry to contradict you. We had a little chat there, and I think we need to have many more chats. This boy, by the way, for this I must commend him that this youngster is writing, a civilian, is writing a book on 1971 war, the whole thing. And he's gone and interviewed people all over. God knows how he's managed to catch such like stalwarts that he was naming to me. But Satyajit, I'm sorry, I differ with you completely. Not because it's you, it is Arvind Nautiyal. It is not a fact. It is not a fact. They shot it. I mean, he wrote to me also at one point of time in a WhatsApp, and I told him, no, this is not how it happened. General Iftikhar Janjwa's helicopter crashed due to other reasons. I have a first-hand report from a Pakistani officer who sent it to me, who was witness. So, you know, we tend to, what should I say, figmentize, you know, or fictionalize, sorry, some of the events that took place, and with the 50 years on, memory fades. And you know, memories start masquerading as actual events. You know, imagination takes over. So this is not how it happened. He didn't shoot. They did a damn good job. He was in the AD battery L60. They were in that one. They did a damn good job. They were sort of giving air defense cover to our medium guns and to the armor. That's how these two people were able to function. And they rightly got a battle honor. So did 151. It's remarkable that 151 AD got where they were a troop, got battle honor Cham. So did that 45 AD regiment also get battle honor Cham. Whereas a large number of infantry units did not get it. 5 Sikh, right in front, whom the Pakistanis have praised, who stood like a rock, did not get it. Deccan Horse, who knocked out so many tanks, did not get it. But this event didn't take place. They were not shot down. They didn't shoot it down. But had he not crashed, the question should be that way, that had he not crashed, would it have played out differently? No. They had reached the end of the tether. Now is the time had come for us to kick them further back. We had already thrown them out from our own side of the river twice. And now we were getting set. We were all set to launch counterattacks. So it wouldn't have happened anyway.
Anybody else? We have time for one more question. Yeah. Anyone? Nobody? All right, so we'll wind up with one question. I mean, history will be non-utilitarian if we don't focus the spotlight on the future. So and that question has partly been asked by Mandeep, but I just want to enlarge on it. See the trends today as you look at global artilleries. You take the Marine Corps, you take the Chinese Combined Arms Brigade. These smaller calibers are being taken down to the companies and the platoons. And both AD and field artillery there are focusing on strategic firepower. So for example, the Chinese have set up their rocket force. Now it is ballistic, cruise and hypersonic missiles. And the AD element of it, the biggest challenge before the US is to merge Aegis, THAAD and Patriot, and they have got space-based satellites, because without that you will not be able to pick the missile in its various trajectories. So I would say that both firepower and interception is getting strategic. And this idea, this debate is completely lost in India. I don't think we have even woken up to it. Now you just see what the Hezbollah and the Hamas are doing. So if the Chinese rocket force artillery, we come under the strategic attack, of what use will these L-70s and all be? They will be simply of no use. So either I'm amiss in my deduction, or if you have something better to say, Colonel Mandeep or General Sandhu. I'm saying that field and AD, just 1 minute, field and AD artillery, the smaller calibers must focus on the tactical role, decentralize it to the infantry, and the armor, they'll take care of it. And you have not because of any other reason, because of a bigger worry emerging. Who's going to look at all this?
There are two ends of the threat if you look at it.
But the point is that the last one is a reality now.
No, both are reality. If you look at it, the strategic threat that you're talking of, you need something to counter that. There is no disputing that. You need space-based sensors, you need interceptors, you need long-range interceptions. That is all, it is a given fact. with the Chinese advancements in missile technology. But you mentioned democratization of firepower. There's also a democratization of air threat. If you look at the air threat now, you look at even Ukraine, what was the biggest threat that Russians faced? It was the drones. It was not the Russian sites being taken out by the Ukrainian aircraft. It was the drones that were taking it on. You see now in Gaza, you see in Iraq, you see anywhere. The biggest threat is what? It is the low end, the more democratic threat that is there. So if you are just focusing on one end and forgetting to focus on the second, you are inviting trouble. You have to look at both. To me, the threat is actually now proliferating in both the spectrums. And the low-level threat is actually getting now more lethal. A paraglider can come and knock you off. A drone can come.
And the strategic threat doesn't bother you?
It is there. I'm saying it has to be catered for. But just focusing that AD now, focusing on the strategic threat, because that is going to be the threat in the future, is actually missing, what is the phrase, the trees for the wood, the woods for the trees.
General Sandhu?
My point.
I think you made a point. And after this Ukraine battle plays out, and also the ongoing conflict with the Hamas, I'm sure the Indian Army will study in detail and draw lessons from this. And there will be a lot of restructuring and rethinking of application of firepower or application of force, for that matter, all components. And it may result in all kind of reorganization, and if it is desirable. You have a point in one thing, that a time has come when the tactical formations should have their own wherewithal, so that they can still perform that. But on the other hand, looking at bigger outcomes, what you say, strategic outcomes, maybe you need a separate force. We don't, see, like you said, Russia and China, they have rocket, missile and proper, for those integrated. We have all the stuff, but there's nothing integrated. We have cruise missiles. We have had Prithvi since God knows when I was still serving. We have Agnis of all kinds. So we have missiles of all kinds. We have rockets. We have BM-21, Pinaka, Smirch. You know, we have all these stuff, but they are not been integrated. They're still part of this, that, and the other. Maybe that or thought for the future, some study.
Okay, thank you very much. So I must end by thanking General AJS Sandhu and Colonel Mandeep for firstly writing these fascinating books, because if they had not been written, we would not get to read them. And some very good anecdotes and some brilliant insights. And the point that I would like to leave with the audience is that unless we read these books, or the principal utility of these books is that they tickle you with regard to current operational realities and the future. As you read them, you wonder. So history has a very seminal role to play, and may historians like General AJS Sandhu and Colonel Mandeep, may their tribe increase. Thank you so much for a fascinating discussion, and thank you for